Okay, guys, I just got the go-ahead that we are live. We're going to apologize that we're a couple minutes late. We actually got ourselves locked out of our Zoom account, but we're here now, and that's all that matters. First thing I want to do is introduce myself. My name is Michelle. I'm a program manager here at Whale and Dolphin Conservation in North America. Whale and Dolphin Conservation is an international nonprofit, and we have offices in 5 different countries. And our North American office is located right here in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So today, as you can see from our screen, we are going to talk about Whale Anatomy 101. So the first question that I have for us to answer is, what actually is anatomy? What does that mean? So anatomy is what scientists do when they study different animals and people's bodies and the different structures that they have within them. Now, why would we study anatomy? Well, that's a great question. So you see, for our whales, it helps us a lot. Whales are really hard to study because for a lot of reasons. So first of all, they live in the ocean and we don't live there. The other thing is that they're really expensive to study because we have to take a boat and they're only coming to the surface every couple of minutes if we're lucky. So it makes it really hard for them to study. When they're down underneath the water, we can't see what they're doing. We don't know what their lives are like under there. So we have to be creative when we start to study them. So scientists will look at the anatomy of whales to look at different parts of their body, and that will give us clues so we can make hypotheses or predictions about what their lives might be like. So anatomy can help us learn more about these species and what they're like. And so I want you to follow along with me today. So we're going to use these same 5 species to talk about all the different parts of the body. So I've actually labeled them all here. So if I say a species and you don't know which one I'm talking about, there should be a label close by. So let me introduce them to you. The first one is a humpback whale. These guys we do a lot of work on here, and they're going to be our main model for today. The one underneath that is called a North Atlantic right whale. Right whales are a critically endangered species. They come here off the coast of Massachusetts. Some of them are right here right now. And they are critically endangered. There's fewer than 400 left. And we do a lot of work on them here in our North American office. The one below that is called a fin whale. They're the second largest species of whale in the whole world. And they're pretty cool whales. We get them here off Massachusetts as well. In the top right, you're going to see a bottlenose dolphin. These guys you're probably pretty familiar with. If I said the word dolphin and an image immediately came to your mind, it's probably of a bottlenose dolphin. And lastly, we have orcas or killer whales. They're pretty familiar to a lot of us. A lot of us know who they are. And we're going to use these 5 species today to talk about anatomy. If you want to follow along with us, feel free to grab a piece of scratch paper. You can draw your own whale. We don't have to show anybody. I know I'm not very good at drawing them. And you can start to label some of their parts. So the first thing I want us to do is just to look at their overall body shape. This will give us an example of why we study anatomy. So if you look at our humpback whale and our right whale, you'll see that they're very round. Frankly, we just say that they're fat. So these two are in one category. Now, if we look at our fin whale and our dolphin and our orca, you'll see they're very long and they're streamlined. And so they must be different than the humpback and the right whales. So what are some hypotheses that we can make, some predictions? Well, if we think about an airplane or a rocket ship, they're very long and slender. This helps them cut through the air. And so the same thing goes for the water. You need something long and slender that's kind of shaped like an airplane or a rocket ship. So you can see that our fin whale, our dolphin, and our orca are that shape. So that tells us, the prediction we can make is that these whales swim faster than the ones that are rounder. Now for a humpback and right whale, this might mean that they're going slower. And so we can say that these ones are the slower whales, the fin whales, the dolphins, and the orcas are faster. Now we can even take that one step further. So why would a whale need to be fast? Well, when we're talking about whale anatomy, usually with pretty much any animal, it all depends on their food. So if something helps you catch food, that's usually why it's there. So we can maybe hypothesize that a fin whale, dolphin, and an orca might use speed to catch their food, while a humpback and a right whale either use something else or they're catching food that's much slower. So you can see we can use anatomy in order to figure out, or maybe at least make predictions or hypotheses about why whales are shaped the way they are in different parts of their lives. We can tell where they live, what they eat, how they catch their food. All of these things we can learn by just looking at their anatomy. So we're going to use the humpback whale as our example. Anytime there's a species on the screen, you're going to see that there's the label for the species right underneath it, so you'll always know who it is. And the first thing I want us to talk about is size. Now, when I showed the humpback whale on the screen, you can't really tell how big it is, but I can tell you that it's 45 to 55 feet long. But it's not until we compare it to something that we're familiar with, like a school bus, that we know just how big it is. Now, if you tuned in last week, or if you're going to go back and watch our videos, my friend Sabrina did a really good presentation about an activity that we have where you can measure different whales. So we give you all the measurements and the different species, and you can actually go ahead and measure them out on your driveway or on your street and see just how big a whale would be if they were in your neighborhood. It's really fun, and it really helps you understand just how big they are. So this is our humpback whale, and the first thing we're going to talk about is its tail. Now, I also say that it's called a tail or a fluke. For whales, those two words mean the exact same thing. So if you hear me say tail in one sentence and fluke in another, it just means the same. So these pictures here aren't really helpful in us looking at their tails. So instead, I took our 5 species and I showed you real live pictures of them. So we can look at them and see that they're all generally the same shape, and that might tell us they all do generally the same job. So what the tail does is it helps them swim. When whales are swimming through the water, most of the power is coming from that tail in the back. Whales move their tails up and down, and this is different than fish. They move them side to side. So you can see that each of them look pretty similar. They each have 2 halves that come together. Now their tails don't have any bones inside. They're all made of cartilage. Now, do you guys know what cartilage is? It's a tissue that we have in our body that's very flexible. And we have it ourselves too. We have it in our noses and we have it in our ears. And whales have it too in a couple different parts of their body, but especially in their tails. The whole thing is made of cartilage, makes it so it can be really flexible, but also really strong. Humpback whales have really special tails as well because they have a pattern on it. So you can see that there's this black and white pattern on it. And this helps us tell them apart as individuals. So we figured out that whales have different patterns. So each whale has a different pattern than the other whale. So it's just like your fingerprint, and that my fingerprint is different than your fingerprint. It helps us tell them apart as individuals. If you want to learn more about that, my friend Monica did a presentation a couple of weeks ago. You can go back and watch her video about how to tell different humpback whales apart. Now, another observation we can make about their tails is that if you look at the fin whale, the dolphin, and the orca, we just said that we think those ones might swim faster. And you'll see that they have very similar shaped tails. That would make a lot of sense. Now, our right whale and our humpback swim slower. And so it tells us that their tails might be slightly different shaped because they have a slightly different job. Okay, so far we've covered their tail. And next we're going to talk about their dorsal fin. So this name makes a lot of sense. When you talk about anatomy, dorsal just means the back. So if you have a fin on your back, it makes sense that it'd be called a dorsal fin. So dorsal fins have an important job. They keep the whale from rolling one way or the other. It keeps them steady in the water. And you'll see here on our humpback whale, there's this kind of short and stubby. If we look at it in all of our other species, you can see how it can look very different, even though it's the same structure. So our humpback whale has this stubbier one. Within humpbacks, they can have completely different shaped dorsal fins. So they're kind of hard to tell because they can either be really big or have really small dorsal fins. For our fin whales, they have a dorsal fin that's put way far back on their body. For our bottlenose dolphin, their dorsal fins are very triangle in shape. They actually get nicks and cuts in them, and scientists will take pictures of those, and they will compare them against a catalog, and that's how they can tell bottlenose dolphins apart. And of course, our orcas have very specific dorsal fins in that it's very tall, especially on our adult males, and it's one of these really striking features that set this species apart. Now you'll see I skipped over the right whale, and if you look for its dorsal fin, you're not going to find it. Right whales actually don't have a dorsal fin, and so There's a couple of things we can guess why. We said before that they're slower swimmers, so it might mean that they might not need a dorsal fin as much as some of the faster swimmers might. Now, their dorsal fin is also made of cartilage, just like their tail. And so it can get bumped, it can get nicked, they can get cuts in it. It's just like if you broke your nose or hurt part of your ear. So far we've talked about their tail or their fluke. We've talked about their dorsal fins. Next, I want to talk about their flippers. So flippers also have cartilage involved. However, they're different than the dorsal fins or the tails. So if we were to do an X-ray, you would see that while there's no bones inside the tail or the dorsal fin, there are bones inside their flippers. So their flippers have the same bones that are inside of our hands, as you can see there. So they think what happened is that when they evolved over millions of years, they used to have hands or paws like we do, except for that wasn't helpful to them when swimming. So if it was covered over, it made it more of a paddle, and that helped them more in their swimming. Now, when whales are swimming, most of the power is still coming from that tail, but their flippers are their steering. It's just like their steering wheel. It helps them be able to turn one way or another in order to maneuver around in their environment. Now you can see that flippers look really different in different species. You can see they're small on the fin whale compared to its body size. And so when we see fin whales swimming, we see that they actually take these really long turns. Kind of like if you drive a really big car, you have to take really wide turns and they make these big circles. For humpbacks though, you'll see that they have really, really long flippers. And so why might that be? So one hypothesis we could make is that it helps them in some part of their life. And what did we say before was the ultimate reason for anything? It's to catch food. So our humpback whales have these long flippers, and those flippers help them to be able to turn much tighter than a fin whale could. So this tells us that it must help them catch their food. Now we said that they were slower swimmers, and so it makes sense that they'd have to have some other way to catch their food besides swimming really fast at them. So their flippers help them make these tight circles, and humpback whales are actually known for doing a behavior called bubble net feeding, where they make a circle of bubbles really tightly, the fish get trapped inside, and they come through and they eat them all. So these flippers help them be able to turn quickly. A fin whale might not be able to do that. So far we've covered their tail or their fluke, their dorsal fin, and their flippers. Now you'll see that our model here has changed. We've changed to an orca. That's because the next thing we have to talk about, humpbacks don't have. We're going to now look inside the mouth and see what's inside. So for this orca, when it opens its mouth, you'll see teeth. So I have a picture of that to show you here. So you'll see it has all of these teeth in its mouth. Now, a lot of other kinds of whales and dolphins have this. They're called toothed whales or odontocetes. Now, if we do a close-up of their teeth, we can look at them and look at the shape. Now, the shape of things helps us know what they're for. And so if you think of your teeth, are they all shaped the same or are they shaped differently? You're saying your teeth are shaped differently. You're right. It's because they all have different jobs. So the front teeth help you bite into things. So if you were to eat an apple, you're going to bite in using those front teeth. And then you don't chew with those front teeth, though. You move the apple to the back teeth. And your molars are flat and they grind together and they grind up your food and then you swallow it. So if we look at an orca's teeth, we see that they're not all different. They're all exactly the same. So what does that tell us? One hypothesis is that all of their teeth are used for the same thing. So this tells us that whales aren't chewing their food. They don't have flat molars like we do. Their teeth are all used just to grab food and then they swallow it whole. So orcas have teeth, but they're not using them to chew. They're just using them to grab their food. So if we look at our 5 species here, 2 of them have teeth in their mouth. So the dolphins and the orcas. Now all the world's dolphins and porpoises have teeth. Orcas, belugas, and sperm whales, most whales and dolphins have teeth in their mouth. However, there's a whole other group of whales that don't have any teeth. So these include our other 3. And so far we've talked on these guys about their fluke and their dorsal fin and the flippers. Inside their mouth, though, they have no teeth at all. and instead they have baleen. So what's baleen? Glad you asked. If you want to go way back in our Facebook Live videos, you'll see my friend Sabrina do a whole presentation about them. She shows you some examples of them, explains all the differences. We'll do a quick rundown here though. So it's hard to see in the picture because the mouth's not open. So instead, I'm going to show you a real picture of a humpback whale. So you'll see all this shiny stuff on its top jaw. This is its baleen. If you see the little squiggly lines within their mouth, those are fish that they're trying to catch. So a whale that's as big as a school bus eats fish that's about the size of a pencil. And so by using their baleen, it basically acts like a strainer. So I know it's still kind of hard to understand, but the best way to describe it is to use two of my favorite things, macaroni and cheese and Finding Nemo. So when you make pasta or spaghetti or macaroni and cheese, in order to make it, you boil water, you put the noodles inside, and then once it's cooked, do you drink the water? No, you want to strain it out. So you put it through a strainer, you get rid of the water, and then you keep the noodles to eat. Now for our whales, they're doing the same thing, except for instead of pasta water, they have salt water, and instead of noodles, they're trying to eat fish. They do this so often that they actually have this strainer built right into the roof of their mouth, and that's what their baleen is. So once they close their mouths and they have fish and water inside, they push it all against their baleen, and the water can slide out, but it's just like a net, the fish gets stuck inside. So talking about Finding Nemo, it's the best way to understand it. So this is Marlin and Dory. Right before they get stuck inside a whale's mouth, you can see all that bristly stuff in the front. That's the baleen. Baleen is made of a protein. We call it keratin, and it's the same stuff that makes up your hair and your fingernails. And so it's really flexible, but also really tough. And so you can see it even from the outside here. But once they get inside, it gives you a completely different view. So here's Marlin and Dory in the water. The top of this picture has this pink part, that's the roof of the whale's mouth. And all these stripes you see on the side, those are the baleen. So the water can fit between them, but the fish cannot. So this is how they catch their food. So they're eating really small fish, but they're eating a lot of them. So of our 5 species, we have 3 of them that all use baleen. And so baleen tells us that chances are that these whales are eating smaller fish or smaller food than the whales who have teeth in their mouth. I also want you to look at the size difference. You see that our humpback, our right whale, and our fin whale are much larger than the dolphin or the orca. So because they're eating so much more food, so many more pounds of food a day, it allows them to be much larger. Okay, so far we've talked about the tail, we've talked about the dorsal fin, we've talked about the flippers, we've talked about baleen or teeth, depending on how they eat. And next, we're going to talk about the ventral pleats. And I know those are kind of big words, but if we break them down, it's really easy to understand. So we talked about how dorsal is on the back. Well, ventral is the opposite. It means the front. So it makes sense your dorsal fin is on your back and your ventral pleats are on your front. Now, pleats are some things that can expand. So you'll see that it kind of looks like they're stripes. These stripes go from their chin, they go all the way down to their belly button. Now, if we look at these, it's kind of weird to think that there'd just be stripes and they wouldn't have any purpose. But once we see whales eat, we understand what they're for. So humpback whales, when they want to eat, they're taking a big mouthful of water and fish. But they'd have to have a really big head in order to fit all of that inside. So instead, their lower jaw and their throat have this really special feature that allows them to eat a lot of food, but also not have this really big head. So these pleats actually expand when they're full. So it basically is like a pelican, how their throats can expand. But when they're not using it, it will contract back. Now, even though they're fatter, they still don't want to have a big throat that's hanging in the water. It's going to make them swim even slower. So these pleats allow it so that they kind of have the best of both worlds. They can expand their throat when they need to, and it contracts when they don't need it anymore. Now, if we look at all of our whales that we have here, we of course are going to highlight our baleen whales. We know that our toothed whales, because they have teeth, are catching their fish one by one. So they would never have to take a big mouthful of water and fish. So they don't need these ventral pleats. But even looking at our baleen whales, you're going to see those stripes on the humpbacks You're going to see it on the fin whale, but you don't see it on the North Atlantic right whale. So what's one prediction that we can make about how North Atlantic right whales feed differently than the other two? Maybe one prediction is that these whales just feed differently. They don't take big mouthfuls of water and fish. Instead, they must feed differently. And if we watch them, we actually find out that that's the truth. So right whales will swim with their mouths open. They have a hole in their baleen in the front, and water filters through their baleen, and their food gets stuck inside. So they actually never do those big lunges like the humpbacks and the fin whales will do. So they don't need their throats to expand like the others do. So it makes a lot of sense why they wouldn't have them. Okay, so far we've talked about their tails or their flukes. We've talked about their dorsal fin. We've talked about the baleen or teeth they have in their mouth. We talked about the ventral pleats that allow them to eat and have all that food in their mouth. We talked about their flippers. And the next thing I want to talk about is their blowhole. Now this is just a fancy whale term, but all it means is their nostrils. Whales have noses just like we do, and their nose has a really important job. It's to open up and for them to breathe in and out through their nose. Now they don't really breathe through their mouths, they only breathe through that nose, and their nostrils or blowholes get onto their pair of lungs, just like we have. If you go back to our videos a couple of weeks ago, you'll see that there's a whole lesson about how whales are mammals, just like we are. And you can learn more about that. But one of the characteristics of being a mammal is that you breathe air. So these guys have to come up to the surface in order to breathe, and they breathe air just like we do. Now you'll see that their blowhole or their nose isn't in the front of their faces like it is for us. It's on the tops of their heads. So what could that tell us about whales? Well, one prediction we could make is that if they're coming up to the surface in order to breathe, then it makes more sense for their nostril or nose to be on the top of their head, so they don't have to bring their whole head out of the water to breathe. Why would that be important? Well, it makes the process faster. And so if they're trying to do something, they just have to come take a quick breath. But mostly it's because it takes them less energy to do that. And they want to conserve their energy so they don't have to eat as much food. So that's why whales have blowholes on the tops of their heads, so they can just come right up to the surface, breathe, and then dive right back down without bringing their whole head out of the water. Now, all whales pretty much have similar blowholes in similar places, but the biggest difference is between a toothed whale, like our orcas and dolphins that we talked about, and a baleen whale, like our humpback, our right whale, and our fin whale. So the biggest difference is just how many blowholes that they have. So our toothed whales have just one blowhole on the top of their head, and the baleen whale have two. Okay, so we're almost done here. We've talked about their tail or their fluke. We have their dorsal fin, the fin on the back. We have their blowholes, their nostrils. We talked about their baleen or teeth, depending on which whale you're talking about. We talked about their ventral pleats that help them feed. We talk about their flippers that help them sear. And the last thing I want you to look at isn't actually one part of their body, but instead I want you to look at the color of their body. So you'll see that humpbacks, their back is this really dark color. It's almost completely black. But if you look at their belly, it's not dark there, it's much lighter. So if we look and see that there's a dark back and a light belly, this is something we call countershading. So we see this in a lot of animals who live in the water. And so it doesn't really make sense of why that would be that they all have the same pattern. But there's one really cool example that I want to share. They're not whales or dolphins, but they really help us. But if you look at these guys, you'll see that it's the same thing. They have light bellies and dark backs. But my favorite example of this are penguins. So when penguins are walking on their feet, they look like they're wearing their little tuxedos. They have these dark backs and these light bellies. So it just kind of looks silly, but hey, they're penguins, they're silly as they are. But once they go into the water, they're horizontal. And so their dark backs are on one side and their light bellies are on the other. So how would this help them? Well, think if you're diving into the ocean and you know a lot of things eat you, you want to try to hide from them. We usually call this camouflage when you're trying to blend in. However, in the water, there's not a whole lot of places to hide. And so instead they have to use their coloring. So like in this picture, you see this penguin that's up at the surface. So if whatever wanted to eat it was down below, they could look up, they'd see this white belly, it would blend in with the light coming in from the surface, and it would help camouflage the penguin. Now, if you think of it an opposite way, if you have your penguin that's down below and whatever wants to eat them is up higher, they're going to look down and their dark backs are going to blend in to the ocean floor. So penguins are really good at this camouflage, and we call it countershading. Same for our whales and our dolphins. So that's it. We've completed our diagram. We talked about their tail or their fluke. They use these to swim. We talk about their dorsal fin. Their dorsal fin keeps them straight in the water, but not all whales have dorsal fins. We talked about their blowholes. They're important to them because that allows them to breathe air in and out. We talked about baleen and how baleen whales like humpbacks, fin whales, and right whales all use these in order to catch their food, but dolphins and orcas will use teeth to catch their fish one by one. We talked about how ventral pleats help humpback whales and fin whales expand their throats to make sure that they can get all the water and fish inside. And we talked about flippers and how they help whales steer in the water column and how their flippers can all look very different. Lastly, we talked about how their dark backs and their light bellies we call countershading. You'll see that in a lot of different animals that live in the water, including penguins who just visit there. And so that's what makes up our Whale Anatomy Class 101. So now I'm going to go back and try to figure out how to stop sharing my screen. Now we did make up a worksheet to go with this lesson, so we're going to post that in the comments here so you can kind of do a review or you can re-watch and complete your worksheet if you want to. Okay, I don't know how to get the comments up here. We're going to answer all of them in the comments that you see. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and ask. You can always put them in the comments. You can send us a message on Facebook. We also have our website, it's whales.org. I really encourage you to visit it. We do have a species guide on there. That's really cool. You can see all the different species and learn more about them. And of course, check out all those other Facebook Live videos that we've been doing. You can learn a lot through them. They all kind of tie together. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed learning about whale anatomy today. Again, ask us if you have any questions, but other than that, we'll talk to you on Thursday. On Thursday, we have my friend Missy, and she's going to be reading a book all about whale poop. So make sure to tune into that. It'll be at 3 o'clock Eastern time on Thursday. Bye, guys. Have a good afternoon, day, whatever time zone you're in.